I want to start today with a premise that, uh, honestly, it makes me genuinely uncomfortable.
Okay.
We spend our whole lives being conditioned to believe that generosity is a virtue.
Right.
It's the ultimate good guy trait.
Absolutely. It's simple.
It's binary. You give, you're good. You hoard, you're bad. End of story.
Hmm.
But I'm looking at this stack of notes from a classical text called The Path of the Seekers. And the author is essentially arguing that for a huge chunk of the population, generosity is actually a vice.
It is, yeah. Or at least what looks like generosity. The source calls it a diagnostic failure.
A diagnostic failure. I like that.
And it's one we almost never catch because it looks so pretty on the outside.
Exactly. Looks like virtue.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm reading this right, this source material suggests that giving it all away might just be a sign that you lack self-control.
That you're psychologically weak. Yes, precisely. We tend to view ethics in these, neat little boxes. Generosity, check. Patience, check. But this text, which is effectively a manual on the mechanics of the human soul, it argues that the human personality doesn't work in binaries.
Yeah.
It works on a spectrum. And on that spectrum, the inability to hold on to money is just as pathological as the inability to give it away.
So that's what we're deep diving into today,
Yeah.
this concept of the middle path. And I have to say, usually when people talk about the middle path, it sounds very zen, very passive.
Right. Just chill out in the middle.
It sounds like compromise.
Yeah.
But this lecture, it frames it totally differently. It frames it as a high-tension wire.
The analogy the source uses is thinner than a hair and sharper than a sword.
Thinner than a hair and sharper than a sword. So it's not a safe place to rest.
No, it is a difficult place to balance, a constant act of balancing.
We are going to unpack that. We're going to look at what the source calls the money test. It's a way to audit your own bank account, or really your feelings about your bank account to see if you're stingy or reckless.
And we have to talk about the equation of zero.
Oh, the equation of zero. That's a terrifying way to look at your lifespan. I'm still processing that one.
It's heavy.
And later, we have to get to the outliers, the people who seem to just break the physics of this middle path,
The exceptions to the rule.
including a man who drank lethal poison to win an argument.
That is a heavy segment, yeah. It deals with this concept of absolute certainty. But you're right, it sounds like complete madness until you understand the mechanics behind it.
Okay, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's stick to the money for a minute, because frankly, the poison story feels like magic. But the money story, that feels like my rent payment.
It hits closer to home.
It really does.
It does. And it's where most of us fail, according to the source.
So let's look at this diagnostic tool. It asks us to ignore the numbers for a second. Ignore your net worth, your savings, all of it. And just look at the feeling of a transaction.
Right. It demands an emotional audit, not a financial one. The source asks a very specific question. Which action is sweeter to your heart?
Sweeter. Not which one is logically right or morally correct.
No, which one gives you that hit of relief, that feeling of, that's better?
Okay, so let's run the simulation. Scenario A. I put money into my savings account. I see the number go up. I feel secure. The world feels a little safer, a little more stable.
Okay.
Scenario B. I write a check to a charity. Or I help a friend who's in a tough spot.
Yeah.
I give the money away.
If scenario A, the keeping, the hoarding, feels sweeter and lighter and more natural to you, and scenario B feels like pulling teeth, like it physically pains you to let go of that money,
Then the diagnosis is stinginess.
yes, you have the disease of miserliness. Your default setting is to hoard.
Okay, that seems straightforward. We all know that guy, right? The guy who counts every penny while he's sitting on a pile of cash.
Sure.
But here is where I got stuck reading the source material. What if I love giving? What if I'm the guy who always picks up the check at dinner? Not because I'm trying to show off, but because it actually feels good.
It feels lighter.
Yes, it feels lighter to spend than to save. In our modern culture, we'd call that person a philanthropist. We'd call them generous.
And this source might call them weak.
Weak.
Yes. Because the definition of virtue here isn't giving, it's control.
Mm-hmm.
If you give because you cannot bear the discipline of holding on to it, you aren't being generous, you're squandering. You are suffering from the disease of extravagance.
So you're falling a dopamine hit just as much as the miser is.
Exactly. The miser is addicted to accumulation, the squanderer is addicted to the purge. Both are out of control.
That is a really harsh take. So you're saying that the person who's constantly donating to every GoFundMe they see might just be lacking impulse control.
If they are doing it to the detriment of their own stability, absolutely. The source introduces this concept of withholding by right.
Withholding by right. That sounds like a legal defense for being cheap.
It's an ethical defense. It's the idea that there is a duty to the self and to your family that actually precedes the duty to the public.
So if you give away your rent money to help a stranger,
You aren't a saint. You're negligent. You're irresponsible. You have crossed that razor's edge from the side of hoarding all the way over to the side of ruin.
so the source is arguing against this sort of martyr complex.
Yeah.
The idea that to be good, you have to be broke.
Completely. The goal isn't poverty. The goal is balance. So the cure for the miser is to force himself to spend.
To break his addiction to hoarding.
Right. But the cure for the squanderer, the so-called generous person, is to force himself to say no. To force himself to save, even when it feels uncomfortable.
It's so counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Because we praise the squander. We love people who buy us drinks. We call them the life of the party.
We like them because we benefit from their lack of control. But spiritually, according to this text, they're drifting. They are slaves to the impulse of purging, of getting rid of it.
So the middle path is the ability to do both, but only when it's appropriate.
Yeah.
It's freedom from the compulsion, either to hoard or to spend.
That's it.
So if I can just summarize this money test for myself, if it hurts to give, you must practice giving. But if it hurts to keep, you must practice keeping. You have to do the thing that feels like resistance training for your soul.
Exactly right. You are trying to muscle confuse your own ego. You're trying to break that habit loop so that you are in charge of the money rather than your emotional cravings being in charge.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like physical therapy for your wallet.
I like that.
But then, right when I thought I had it figured out, the source throws a massive wrench in the gears.
Right.
We just established that giving everything away is extravagance and negligence.
Fifth flaw, yes.
But then the text brings up Abu Bakr. For context, this was the closest companion to the Prophet of Islam. And there's this very famous, very celebrated historical moment where he brings his entire fortune, literally everything he owns, and donates it to the cause.
100% of his net worth. Gone in an instant.
So I'm reading this and thinking, wait a minute. You just spent a whole chapter telling me that giving everything away is a vice. You just told me I need to keep enough for my family, withholding by fat. Right. But here is the ultimate role model doing exactly what you said not to do. So how does the source reconcile that? Is it just a flat-out contradiction?
It looks like one, doesn't it? I mean, it's the first question everyone asks. But the answer lies in a variable we don't often calculate, especially not in modern psychology. The source calls it certainty.
Certainty.
The expert in our source, he explains that the rules of the middle path, don't give it all away, keep a safety net, be prudent, those rules apply to 99.9% of people.
They apply to you and me.
To you and me. Because we rely on cause and effect. We rely on the money in the bank to buy the food at the grocery store.
Right. I need the money to pay the grocer. That's how the world works.
But there are apparently these rare states of absolute certainty, or what the text calls a spiritual overflow. And in that state, the standard laws, even the standard religious recommendations, are temporarily transcended.
Transcended how? What does that even mean?
Well, when Abu Bakr gave everything, he was asked, "What did you leave for your family?" And his famous answer was, "I left them God and his messenger."
Which is a great line for a movie, But in reality, that sounds incredibly risky.
For you or me, it would be reckless. It would be delusional, frankly. But the source explains that for him, in that moment, that wasn't just a poetic phrase. It was a concrete reality.
Okay.
His internal conviction, his certainty, was so solid that giving away the physical coins didn't create any instability in his heart. He knew, with the same certainty that you and I know that gravity exists, that he and his family would be taken care of.
So the argument is, the rule exists because the rest of us have anxiety. If you have literally zero anxiety, you can break the rule.
Essentially, yes. The speaker warns us, he says very clearly, this is not a license for you to be reckless.
Good.
He says, unless you have that level of internal state where you have absolutely no fear of the future, you cannot mimic the actions of those who do. If you or I gave everything away, we'd be stressing out the next day, begging for loans, resenting the very charity we just gave.
And that's why it's extravagant for us.
But virtuous for him. His state of certainty transformed the act.
It's like seeing a professional stuntman jump a motorcycle over a helicopter. Just because he lands it doesn't mean I should try with my bicycle.
That is a perfect analogy. He has the skills, the physics calculation, and the equipment to make that jump. You just have a bike and good intentions. You will crash.
And speaking of stunts that nobody should try, we have to talk about the poison.
Yes.
Because if the money story was the bicycle jump, This next story is jumping the Grand Canyon without a parachute.
It is the most extreme example in the text, without a doubt.
Okay, so I can get on board with the financial prudence. Don't be cheap, don't be reckless. That's solid, practical advice for life. But then the source takes this left turn that, well, it honestly throws the whole sensible middle path idea right out the window for a second.
You're talking about Khalid ibn al-Walid?
I am. We're talking about a famous historical figure, a general, renowned for his military tactics. But this story isn't about tactics. It's about a town's surrender. Can you set the scene for us? Because I want to make sure I'm not misinterpreting how wild this is.
The scene is a siege. Khalid's army is outside a fortified town. The leader of the town comes out to parley, to negotiate.
Right.
And he offers a challenge. He essentially says, we have this poison. It is absolutely lethal. If you claim your truth is so powerful, that your God is so powerful, drink this.
In front of everyone.
Yes. If you survive, we surrender the town. If you die, well, problem solved for us.
It's a trial by ordeal. It's the kind of thing you see in like a fantasy novel, not in a text about spiritual ethics.
Correct. It's an extreme test.
And Khalid takes the bottle, and he says a short prayer, and he drinks it.
And he survives, completely unharmed.
Okay, stop there. I have two huge problems with this. One, physics. Poison kills people. That is a biological fact.
It is.
Two, ethics. This is suicide. If I walk into traffic expecting God to save me, that's not faith, that's delusion. Religiously, that is a major sin. So how on earth does the source justify this?
And this is the crux of the entire lecture right here. You are 100% right. If a panel of jurists, legal scholars, watch that happen, they would rule it illegal. They would say, Khalid, you are committing self-harm. This is forbidden.
So he was wrong to do it.
Legally, from an external point of view, yes. But the source argues that in that specific moment, that same spiritual overflow we just talked about occurred.
The same thing that happened with the money.
Exactly. Think of the law, the religious law, as the rules for normal spiritual gravity. Gravity applies to everyone. But the source argues that when a person's internal conviction, their absolute certainty, reaches a boiling point, it can momentarily override the physical cause and effect of the world.
So he wasn't testing God. That's the key.
No, that's the critical distinction. If you or I did it, we would be testing God. We would be saying, I hope this works. Khalid wasn't hoping. He knew. In that split second, his perception of reality was that the poison was harmless because the creator of the poison willed it to be so.
He had absolute certainty.
That's the term. It wasn't a gamble for him.
That sounds incredibly dangerous as a precedent.
It is incredibly dangerous. That is why the text immediately follows up with a massive warning. Do not try this.
Yeah, don't try this at home. Seems like a bit of an understatement here.
The expert in the source is very, very clear. He says this was an anomaly. It was a miracle meant for that specific moment to prove a point to that specific town. It is not a rule to live by.
So it's not a precedent?
No. You cannot build a society on people drinking poison. The middle path is for the 99.9%. The poison path, if you want to call it that, is for the 0.01% who have reached a level of connection where the physics of the world become flexible for them.
It really hammers home that point that the internal state changes the external rule.
Exactly. The action of drinking poison is usually suicide. But with the right internal state, it becomes a miracle. The action of giving all your money away is usually reckless. But with the right internal state, it becomes the highest form of charity. The heart dictates the reality of the act.
This distinction between sort of trickery and truth, it actually leads perfectly into the next story, which I found even more fascinating because it feels like an episode of Mythbusters.
Right.
It's like it debunks the miracle business.
The confrontation with the Rifa'a sect, yes.
Right, so you have this sect in the medieval period, and their claim to fame, their whole marketing strategy, is that they can walk through fire. They hold these massive public gatherings, they light these huge fires, and their leaders walk through them completely unharmed. The crowds go wild. They believe these men are saints.
Of course. It was a powerful recruiting tool. It's visual proof of divinity, right? If fire doesn't burn you, you must be holy.
So enter Ibn Taymiyyah. He's a scholar, a logician, and he is not impressed. He looks at this spectacle and says, this isn't a miracle, this is chemistry.
He knew the trade secrets, he'd done his homework.
The source actually mentioned specific ingredients. Frog fat.
Frog fat is the specific one mentioned, yeah. It sounds bizarre to us.
Orange peel oil.
Talc. Right, substances that create a thermal barrier.
It's the Leidenfrost effect. Right, it's like when you dip your hand in water and you can touch molten lead really fast. The steam creates this little barrier.
Mm?
It's physics, not faith.
Exactly. It's a layer of insulation. If you move fast enough, the heat doesn't have time to penetrate the grease. It was a classic parlor trick disguised as spirituality.
So Ibn Taymiyyah doesn't just, write a paper about it. He goes to their event and challenges the leader to a firewalk.
But with a condition, a catch.
The catch is the hot water and vinegar wash.
Yes. He says, before we walk into the fire together, we are both going to scrub our bodies down with hot water and vinegar.
Which is an acidic solvent. It would strip all the oils.
It removes the frog fat. It removes the trick.
I just love the visual of this. The source describes this Stoic scholar physically grabbing the sect leader by his robes, trying to drag him toward the fire, shouting, "Wash and let's go!" And the holy man is digging his heels in, refusing.
Because the fraud was exposed, he knew that without the grease, he was just a man, and fire burns men.
But here's the kicker for me. This is the part that connects it all. Later, his students asked him, "Okay, we get it. You knew he was faking. But you didn't have any frog fat on you either. If he had actually agreed, and you both washed and then walked in, wouldn't you have burned to death?"
And that is the callback to the Khalid story, to the poison. Ibn Taymiyyah's response was, no, I was absolutely certain that God would make it cool and safe for me, just as he did for Abraham.
So we have two people, theoretically, about to enter a fire. One is relying on frog fat,
A physical trick.
and the other is relying on certainty.
And the source is telling us the frog fat is fragile. It can be washed off with vinegar, but the certainty, that is indelible. That is the only true armor. But again, and I cannot stress this enough, this is not a license for you, the listener, to go play with fire.
Please don't. We do not have enough insurance to cover that.
These stories serve one single purpose, to show us the power of the internal state. We are so obsessed with the external variables, the money, the job, the frog fat. But the source is screaming at us that the internal variable, the state of your heart, is what actually dictates your reality.
It's incredible, but let's bring it back down to earth. Most of us aren't fighting mystics or conquering towns.
Yeah.
We're just trying to pay our mortgage and, not be a greedy person.
Yeah.
The source gives us a metaphor for what a healthy relationship with money actually looks like. And it's not gold coins, it's tap water.
Yes. The water analogy. This, to me, was the most practical and maybe the most difficult part of the whole deep dive.
Okay, so the goal isn't to hate money, and it isn't to love money. The goal is to treat money like water in your house. Unpack that.
Think about the water in your pipes right now. You need it. You use it every single day. You literally cannot survive without it.
Sure.
If you're thirsty, you get a drink. If a guest comes over and asks for a glass of water, what do?
I give it to them. I don't even think about it. I'm not calculating the cost per milliliter or anything.
Exactly. You don't hesitate. You don't think, oh no, my net worth in water is decreasing. And more importantly, do you obsess over it?
No.
Do you walk through your front door after work and your first thought is, where is my water? Is my water safe? Should I hide my water somewhere?
Of course not. That would be insane.
That is the state we are supposed to reach with wealth. It should be a tool. It's necessary. But it should not occupy your heart. You shouldn't be anxious about its presence or its absence as long as your basic needs are met.
But hold on. That sounds great on paper. Just treat money like water. But water's cheap. Here, at least. It flows out of the wall. Money is hard to get. It's scarce.
And you've hit on the exact problem. The source admits this is incredibly hard. The speaker says something like, one in a nation might reach this.
One in a nation. Wow.
Because unlike water, we are biologically wired to hoard resources. The source quotes the scripture. Quote, "And you love wealth with an immense love." It's in our DNA to accumulate because for most of human history, accumulation meant survival.
So we're literally fighting our own biology here.
We are fighting the scarcity mindset. We treat money as if it is the source of our life rather than just a tool for our life. The spiritual elite, according to this text, have rewired their brains to view money as abundant, or at least provided by an abundant source, so they don't cling to it.
So the challenge is to treat a scarce resource with the emotional detachment you'd have for an abundant resource.
Perfect. That is the definition right there. To have the money in your hand, but not in your heart. If it's there, great, you're grateful. If it's gone, you're patient. Just like the water tap. If the water shuts off for a day, you call the plumber, you're annoyed, but you don't have an existential crisis.
You don't feel like your value as a human being has dropped because the tap is dry. That distinction in your hand versus in your heart, that's the key. But getting there, That requires walking that razor's edge we talked about at the beginning.
And that leads us to the big why. Why bother? Why go through all this trouble? Why struggle against your own biology, your own evolution, to find this perfect, difficult balance? It sounds exhausting.
It does. The source offers a motivation, though. And it's not spiritual fluff. It's math.
It is. The source brings up what you could call the calculus of suffering, or as I like to call it, the mathematics of eternity.
This is a heavy one. Let's break down the equation of zero.
The speaker asks us to consider a simple mathematical rule. Any number divided by infinity equals what?
Zero. Or, as close to zero as makes no difference.
Right. If you have $1 billion and you divide it by infinity, it's nothing. So he says, if you have 70 or 80 years of life, your entire existence on Earth, and you divide it by an infinite afterlife, the value of that time duration is mathematically zero.
It's a terrifying thought. It sort of makes everything feel meaningless.
Or it makes everything feel manageable. That's the flip side. The speaker uses this great travel analogy. Imagine you are on a trip to a resort. The resort is perfect. It lasts forever. You get to live there. But the driveway to get into the resort, it's a mess.
The potholed driveway.
Yes. The road is bumpy.
Right.
The car has no AC and it's hot. The kids are screaming in the back. But you know with absolute certainty that this driveway is only 5 minutes long.
Right.
And it leads to a vacation that never, ever ends.
You'd put up with the potholes, you wouldn't even really complain.
You'd say, this is nothing. You wouldn't spend your time trying to pave the driveway or reupholster the car seats. You would just endure the bumps because your eyes are on the destination.
The source is arguing that almost all of our anxiety comes from a fundamental math error.
Exactly. We treat the 70 years like it's the destination. We treat the beat-up car like it's the resort. We obsess over the potholes, the lost job, the rude neighbor, the slow wifey, and we completely forget the palace at the end of the road. If you truly internalize the math, that this life is zero compared to what comes next, the suffering loses its sting. It doesn't disappear, but it becomes negligible.
It recontextualizes suffering.
Yeah.
It's not that the suffering isn't real, but its duration is, in the grand scheme of things, irrelevant.
And that perspective, that shift changes your focus. If you know the road is short, you don't spend your time looking out the window and yelling at other drivers. You focus on your own steering wheel.
Which leads us to the biggest distraction we face on this road. Other people.
The great distraction.
This is a huge section of the deep dives, the external versus the internal I. The source makes a really strong claim here. It says that when the divine wants good for a person, he makes them aware of their own faults.
And conversely, when he withdraws his support, when a person is, in a spiritual sense, dropped, that person becomes obsessed with the faults of others.
It's the Karen phenomenon diagnosed as a spiritual illness.
In a way, yes. The source uses this cat and camel dynamic, or maybe you know it as the speck and log. He talks about a person who criticizes a woman for her headscarf being slightly incorrect. Maybe a few strands of hair are showing.
A minor infraction.
A tiny one. But the criticizer themselves is eating forbidden money.
Which means?
It could be anything. Fraud. Laziness at work that you're being paid for. Theft. Embezzlement. He says you are staring at a speck of dust in someone else's eye while you are ignoring a tree trunk in your own.
It's deflection. It's just so much easier to yell at the woman with the scarf than to admit to myself that I'm stealing from my company.
It's worse than deflection. The source says it's a sign of doom, a sign you've lost divine guidance.
Wow.
It brings up this idea of internal versus external personalities, which is very similar to modern psychology's locus of control. Successful people, spiritually successful people, have an internal locus of control. They focus on what they can change. I can fix my spending. I can fix my anger. I can fix my own character.
Whereas the external people,
They blame everything outside themselves. The government, the boss, the economy, the times are bad, society is corrupt. The speaker in the source has this great line. He says, "Do you think you are the only holy person on earth who deserves a better government than the one you have?"
ouch, that's a reality check.
It's a harsh one. He says, busy yourself with your own repair.
But here's the problem, right? If we are supposed to be looking at our own faults, how do we even find them? Because the source admits the mirror doesn't show the inside. We are blind to our own defects. We all think we're the hero of our own story.
We do. We rationalize everything. I was only angry because I was tired, or I was just being stingy because I'm prudent. We spin the narrative to make ourselves look good.
So how do we see the truth?
The source gives us 4 specific methods, 4 mirrors, you could say, to find the ugly truth about ourselves.
Okay, let's run through them. Method 1, the expert guide.
This is finding a doctor of the soul. a mentor, a teacher, a sheik who has the insight to look at you and say you are arrogant or you have a hidden envy and then prescribe a cure.
The ideal scenario.
The gold standard. But there's a catch.
A big one.
A huge one. The source text was written centuries ago by Al-Ghazali, and even he said back then, in our time, these doctors are rare. And the speaker in our source, he just laughs and says, if they were rare then, they're almost impossible to find now.
So method 1 is the gold standard, but it's basically out of stock. We can't rely on finding a Yoda to guide us.
We can't. So we move to method 2, the truthful friend.
This one sounds nice. Just ask your buddy. Hey man, tell me honestly, am I a jerk?
It sounds nice, but it's brutal if you do it right.
Yeah.
The source tells the story of Omar, the second caliph. Now remember, Omar was one of the most powerful leaders in the world at the time. A tough guy, not soft at all.
Right.
But he would go to his close friends, men like Salman and Hutaifa, and he would ask them, what are my flaws? What have you seen in me that is crooked?
And they actually told him. I feel like if a president asked his senior staff that today, they'd just compliment him for being so humble.
That's the difference. Salman actually said to him, I heard that you have 2 suits of clothes, one for the day and one for the night, and that you have 2 kinds of food on your table for a meal.
Wait, hold on. Having 2 outfits and 2 dishes for dinner is a flaw? That sounds like just basic living to me.
To us, yes. But for a leader at that time who was trying to embody absolute humility and live at the same level as the poorest person in his nation, it was seen as a drift towards excess.
Here's that razor's edge again.
Exactly. Salman is saying you are drifting toward luxury. Be careful.
How did Omar react? Did he get defensive? Did he fire him?
No. He didn't say, do you know how hard I work? I deserve 2 suits. He just asked, is there anything else? And then he fixed it. He got rid of 1 suit.
The source makes a really sharp point here, that this is precisely why method 2 fails for us today. We don't want friends like Salman.
No, we don't. The speaker says, we treat advice like a scorpion attack. If a friend gently tells us, hey, you were a bit rude to that waiter, we cut them off. We say they're being toxic or judgmental.
So our friends learn to either flatter us to keep us happy, the yes men, or worse, they envy us and secretly want us to stay flawed so they can feel better about themselves.
We treat advice like a scorpion attack. I think that line is just so perfect. It shows how fragile our egos have become.
Which leads perfectly into method 3, which I think is the most actionable and maybe the most genius one for modern people. If your friends won't tell you the truth because they like you too much, who will?
Your enemy. Method 3. Use your enemy as your mirror.
The eye of hatred exposes every fault. That's the quote.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Your friends might overlook your bad habits because they love you. They see you through rose-colored glasses. But your enemy, they are keeping a dossier on you. They're actively looking for every chink in your armor.
So the strategy is listen to the haters.
But not to get angry. That's the key. You have to use their insults as a checklist. If your biggest rival at work says you are a greedy, arrogant liar, instead of firing back on social media, you should pause and ask yourself, wait, am I greedy? In what ways am I arrogant? Have I been dishonest?
It's free consulting from the person most motivated to find your weaknesses.
Exactly. They are digging up the dirt that you've been trying to hide from yourself. Why pay a therapist when your enemy will tell you what's wrong with you for free?
That is some next-level mental judo. You take the force of their attack and you use it to purify yourself. You turn their malice into your medicine.
It turns your biggest liability and enemy into your biggest asset. It removes the sting of the insult because you're too busy analyzing the data they've just given you.
Okay, and finally, method 4. If you don't have a mentor, your friends are all liars, and you have no enemies, what's left?
Mixing with the general public, method 4 is treat the world as a mirror.
How does that work?
So the source says, if you see someone doing something annoying or evil, immediately check yourself for that same trait. It's like projection, but in reverse.
So if I see someone shouting in traffic and I think, wow, what an angry, out-of-control person, they look ridiculous.
Before you finish judging them, you have to immediately ask yourself, do I do that? When I get angry, do I lose control like that?
So instead of just judging them, you use them as a simulation of your potential self.
Yes. If you hate a quality in someone else, it's a red flag that you either have that quality or are in danger of developing it. The source says, the believer is a mirror to the believer. If you see something you hate in them, you have to assume it might be a reflection of you, and you delete it from your own character.
The speaker says something really profound here. He says, if everyone corrected in themselves what they hated in others, we wouldn't need police or governors.
Because we would all be self-regulating. We'd all be auditing our own behavior based on the bad behavior we witness around us every day.
It's a powerful idea. It puts all the responsibility squarely back on you. You can't fix a guy shouting in traffic, but you can ensure you aren't him.
Precisely. And that ties back to the whole theme of this deep dive. The middle path isn't about controlling the world. It's about rigorous, almost surgical self-control.
So let's try to bring this all together. This has been a heavy stack. We started with the money test checking. If hoarding or spending gives you that sugar rush, and realizing that both are flaws, both are addictions.
And we looked at the exceptions to the rules. The people with absolute certainty who can drink poison or walk into fire because their internal reality can, in rare moments, override physical laws. But we agreed that's not for us. That's for the stuntmen of the spirit.
For us, the model is the water analogy. Use money, but don't love it. Don't let it live in your heart. It's a tool, not an idol.
Then we did the math. Life divided by infinity is 0, so stop complaining about the potholes in the driveway. The drive is short, the destination is forever.
And finally, we just went through how to audit ourselves. Since we can't see our own faces, we need mirrors. A rare mentor, a truthful friend, an honest enemy, and the general public.
It's a complete system for self-correction, from wealth to character flaws.
It is. But I think the biggest takeaway for me is just that razor's edge concept. We want ethics to be easy. We want a checklist. Just be a good person. But this source says no. Being a good person is a dynamic, difficult, constant act of balancing. It's active, not passive. You are always correcting your course.
It is a fight. It's a struggle. The source says the mirror doesn't show the inside. You have to go looking for your own flaws, and that requires a level of honesty with yourself that is, frankly, terrifying. But the alternative is just drifting. And drifting always leads to one of the extremes: stinginess or recklessness, rage or cowardice.
It is a fight. But as the source reminds us, the destination makes the bumpy road worth it.
The equation of 0.
Exactly. So here's our final thought for you to chew on today. We talked about that equation of 0, that your lifespan, when compared to eternity, is mathematically nothing. A blip.
Right, the pothole driveway.
So if that's actually true, why do the anxieties of today feel so heavy? Why does a bad meeting at work, or a dent in your car, or a rude comment from a stranger feel like the end of the world?
It's a question of perspective, isn't it?
Is it possible that our entire emotional baseline, our whole sense of what's important, is built on a fundamental math error? And if you truly deeply understood that this is just the driveway to the palace, what would you stop worrying about right now, this second? What baggage would you just drop on the side of the road?
That is the question.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the mechanics of the self. We hope you found some water in the desert.
See you next time.
Take care.